Hi guys, so Ian Blackford, the leader of the SNP in Parliament, asked Boris Johnson a number of questions. I want you to notice the change in tack by the SNP leader. He, instead of focusing on Scotland, he focuses on the UK. And I think this is in an attempt to stop Boris Johnson from grandstanding or attempting to turn these issues that affect everyone into some sort of political football to attack the SNP. So let's hear what he had to say.
Other things. Mr. Speaker, the Office of National Statistics figures published yesterday demonstrate what the SNP have been warning about for months, that the UK faces a growing Tory unemployment crisis. It is now beyond doubt that the Chancellor's last-minute furlough U-turn came far too late for thousands who've already lost their jobs as a result of Tory cuts and delays and the dither that took place. UK unemployment has now risen to 4.8%. Redundancies are at a record high and nearly 800,000 fewer people are in employment. To support those who have lost their incomes, will the Prime Minister now commit to make the £20 uplift to universal credit permanent and extend it to legacy benefits so that no one, Prime Minister, is left behind?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that the right honourable gentleman, the leader of Scottish Nationalists, is now supporting universal credit.
Well, see, I've talked about this before. Boris Johnson doesn't answer questions; he responds to them. There was no mention of supporting universal credit. Universal credit is a disaster. I imagine if I asked Ian Blackford, "What's your opinion on universal credit?" he would say it's an absolute disaster. Now, of course, Boris Johnson is attempting to grandstand here. He's attempting to take, a question and use it to promote his position, not actually answer the question.
Because he was opposed to it at the last election. Yes, of course, that uplifting continues, Mr. Speaker, until March, and I'm delighted.
Until March. See, so he's not going to extend. Why? Why just until March? Why not make it permanent? An extra £20. Does Boris Johnson believe that at the end of March, people who are on universal credit will be somehow out of the woods? They'll be, be wealthy or something after March, so that it's okay to cut it off?
I'm delighted to say that the furlough scheme is being extended right the way through to March as well, and that will support people across our whole United Kingdom, protecting jobs and livelihoods across the whole UK in exactly the way that he and I would both want.
See, the problem is that Ian Blackford and myself, but Ian Blackford has been asking for months now to extend the furlough scheme, and the response he got was, "No, we're not going to extend it because we want to get people back into jobs, get people back into employment. Furlough scheme is wasteful. If the furlough scheme is just a support for people during the pandemic, now that the pandemic is over, as Boris Johnson was more or less trying to say, we want to get people back into jobs. The furlough scheme is just creating more problems, social problems. We want people back into jobs." And now they're extending it. They understood that they would have to extend it. They knew they would, because the SAGE were telling them that there will be a second wave, and you may need to impose a lockdown, or you will have to impose some sort of restrictions. And they continued to resist, and they continued to say no to Ian Blackford and the leader of the opposition. "No, we will not extend the furlough scheme. It's not necessary. We have other means." And now they extended it.
Right, let's return.
But sorry, I just want to add, by telling businesses that you were going to end the furlough scheme, businesses adapted to that. They laid off staff. They prepared to lay off staff. They reorganized their businesses in order to work with fewer people. And then when you extended it out of the blue, many of these businesses had already changed. Many people were laid off anyway. And also the new furlough scheme is different to the older one. But by saying that, yeah, we're just extending it and that would fix all the problems, it did not.
To Ian Blackford. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I respectfully say to the Prime Minister, the idea is that the Prime Minister tries to answer the question that's been put to him, and it is shameful that the Prime Minister still refuses to give a commitment to the uprating of the £20 to universal credit.
And I just want to add, of course, once again, what is the point in having Prime Minister's questions when the Prime Minister doesn't answer the questions? It's a waste of time. What is the point in having the Speaker of the House? If the Speaker of the House isn't able to tell the Prime Minister, I'm sorry, Prime Minister, you didn't answer the question. Can you please answer the question? What is the point? Are they there just to shout order? Are they there just to say to people, no, don't go out that door, come out this door?
The SNP will continue to demand a permanent U-turn on Tory plans to cut universal credit. Mr. Speaker, another group who've been left behind by this Prime Minister are the 3 million people who have been completely excluded from UK government support. Since the start of this crisis, the Prime Minister has repeatedly refused to lift a finger to help these families. Can I say to him, in the run-up to Christmas, the forgotten millions will be amongst those who are struggling to get by and worried about their future? So can I ask the Prime Minister, will he finally fix the serious gaps in his support schemes to help the excluded, or will he make it a bitter winter for millions of families across the United Kingdom?
I think there are a number of problems with this type of question. So he's not asking a specific question. He's just asking a general question. And I think he's doing that because he knows that Boris Johnson will not respond. So instead, he has to point out to the people who are watching that Boris Johnson doesn't care about people. And it's going to be a bad winter for the poor and the working class. See, if Parliament was operating correctly and Boris Johnson was forced to answer questions, then you would actually have questions that were specific. You would have questions like, how much are you going to spend on this? How many people are going to be covered by this? What is this policy's goal or whatever? And if Boris Johnson actually had to answer, the Prime Minister had to answer specific questions, then you would actually have a real debate. You would have real, it wouldn't be a waste of time. But this is a waste of time because Boris Johnson isn't being held to account. How is this holding the government to account? You hear Jacob Rees-Mogg complaining about, we need to bring people back into Parliament to hold the government to account. But even if they are in Parliament, even if they're not in Parliament, the government are not being held to account because the government don't have to answer questions.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman knows, I hope, that we're not only continuing with the uprating of universal credit until next year. We've invested 210 billion, as I say, in jobs and livelihoods, but we've also
210 billion. What does that mean for ordinary people, Boris? Oh, we're going to spend 100 million on this. We're going to spend $1 billion on that. We're going to spend 50 million here and 10 million there and 3 million here and £200,000 here. What does that mean for the people on the ground? If somebody's struggling to pay bills, if somebody's struggling to put food on their table, and Boris Johnson says, don't worry, we have £100 billion on this. And it's like, okay, but how does that help me as an individual? Because if Boris Johnson said, look, every person, anyone who's on universal credit, your universal credit is going to increase by £100 a week or £100 a month or something like that. Then people would understand, wow, that's great. I can understand how much I'm going to receive and I can work around that. But these empty numbers, empty figures of 100 million here or 10 billion there, it means nothing. All it is for him to grandstand. Look, the government are spending loads of money on you. But it means nothing to the people on the ground. Unfortunately, many people will accept these figures and think, oh, look, the government cares about us. See, they're spending hundreds of millions over here and hundreds of millions over there. But it means nothing to the people on the ground. They need to see the real numbers and how they affect them personally.
So just brought forward a winter support package, Mr. Speaker, for the poorest and neediest, supporting people, young people, kids who need school meals, supporting people throughout our society, throughout the tough period of COVID, as I think the entire country would expect. That is the right thing to do, and we will continue to do it, Mr. Speaker.
So once again, it's just, and we see it with the in Prime Minister's questions when it's dealing with the opposition. Boris Johnson answers vaguely the first question, and then he uses the second question to grandstand because he knows that there won't be any follow-up questions. Ian Blackford has two questions. The first is he asks something specific, or he tries to, and the second is his attempt to hold Boris Johnson to account, but Boris Johnson is not being held to account. What is the point of all of this? It's going to continue like this. Boris Johnson is just going to use his position to promote himself, to promote the government, even though the government are making it worse. For example, Boris Johnson will talk about how they spend huge amounts of money, like 100 million on this or 100 million on that. But when he's asked about specific payments, like, for example, £670,000 to consultants or whatever, he's a bit more silent. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.